RA Design House, that's RA Design, Haus, and E-4 Media presents E-4 Sports, sports through the eyes of veterans, with your host, good old JR, and the ferocious Phil. We have a lot to talk about today. We are going to talk about the NFL Conference champions and their championship games. We're going to talk a little coaching carousel, and then for all of the veteran listeners out there, we're going to discuss how the NFL keeps making themselves look like shit. On that note, how you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing good.
Good. Glad to hear that. You've been in a little pain lately, though, haven't you?
Yeah, got a couple little nicks and scratches and stuff that need to be taken to the body shop and fixed.
All Army issued, I guess?
Some, yes.
Yeah.
More than likely, most of them, yes.
Well, you know, for everybody listening, we're here stationed in Houston. So our bodies are trying to adjust to this crazy back and forth weather that we've been having. Yeah, a lot of you northerners are looking down upon us and saying, what? Really? Your whole city shut down? But I do need to explain to you. This is the first time that we've had this kind of winter since I've been alive. We've had some snow, but we have not had that blistering cold like Midwest. This city is not prepared for snow or ice.
And when it gets under 50 degrees, it's like it being 10 degrees up north.
Exactly. You know, we're used to 115-degree summer with what? Maybe a down of 102 during the fall?
Oh, during the fall? Yeah, it stays pretty warm here, but personally, I welcome the lovely cold weather we've been having. It's been phenomenal as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, I enjoy this weather. I think what's hilarious, though, is, you know, I just got back from Colorado, and last week I get into Colorado, it's 13 degrees, and then all of a sudden the next day it's 47 with a high of like 53 while y'all were in the teens.
Yeah, bizarro world.
Yes, it was quite enjoyable. I was out in this nice hoodie, and everybody here was all freezing cold, whining about the ice.
Well, 99% of the people.
All right. So, let's get to the conference championships game that just happened this past Sunday. First, I want to talk about the Jaguars-New England game, because to me that was more of a game.
They were both good games. One just was more of a blowout, and the other one was a little bit tighter, despite the referees ignoring some calls that I thought were pretty blatantly obvious. But according to the league, yeah, they don't play favorites. The league isn't exactly huge fans of the Patriots, especially with Spygate and Deflategate and all that. So you gotta take it for what it's worth. Unfortunately, the Patriots did pull the win out, which I'm sure, other than the New England area, the Northeast, probably 90% of the country was probably cheering against the Patriots. But they are a good team. It'll be interesting to see if Gronkowski can pass concussion protocol and be back in time for the Super Bowl. But Jacksonville had a heck of a season. They played a heck of a game. I personally feel like the referees kind of missed, maybe a half a dozen calls that they should have made. But when one team gets called for 10 penalties and the other team gets called for one, I think they probably could have let them play on some of those calls.
I'll agree with you on the referees. I mean, anytime you watch a New England game, you realize you get the feeling that the referees are being paid by New England themselves. I mean, I'm not casting shadows or anything, but everybody watching football that's not a New England fan understands that the referees give them the benefit of the doubt every time. So it's not even benefit of the doubt anymore. They just get calls going their way.
No, it's not really benefit of the call. It's more like every time a New England receiver misses the ball, doesn't make the catch, the first thing that they do is they look at the referee and they give him the no flag look.
Yeah. Every
And-
time that Brady
and-
gets touched with the pinky, he's looking and saying, well, where's roughing the passer?
Oh, well, God forbid you go anywhere near his knees, because then he just gets very irate, if you will. Now, I was incorrect. I said the Jags got hit for 10 penalties. It was only 6, but still 98 yards in penalties
Yep.
for the Jags.
Compared to one
Penalty
yep.
for 10 yards for New England.
Yeah, the what's even crazier is New England was able to pull that out when they couldn't even barely convert on third downs. New England was able to convert 3 of 12 third downs, while Jacksonville was able to go 6 and 15. Time of possession, Jacksonville had more, 35-08 compared to 24-52. I was quite surprised with how Bortles was able to take the pressure he did. He was sacked 3 times. I believe he was touched 8. He was still able to pull off 293 yards. A completion rate 98.5 with 23 completions on 36 attempts. And this is Blake Bortles, which I have to say, at the beginning of the season, was looked very down upon. I mean, I even remember the Texans playing the first game of the season, and we made him look good. Maybe we didn't. Maybe he, in some way, he's good. I wouldn't say he's great in any sense of the word, but he's just not consistent.
I think Bortles would be a much better quarterback. No, he's not great right now. I think he has the potential to be a very good quarterback if he gets the proper coaching, and which I think is one of the biggest problems with Jacksonville right now. But I mean, still, he was just shy of 300 yards in the game. He didn't throw any. He did not throw any interceptions, which is obviously a good thing. As far as rushing goes, not so good. But he has proven that if he really needs to, he can run the ball. I like Bortles. I still think that, maybe Bortles is one of these guys that, with a change of scenery, maybe he becomes that great quarterback. Don't forget, Drew Brees, started out in San Diego. He was originally drafted by San Diego and then wound up going to the Saints. And not that he wasn't a good quarterback in San Diego, but New Orleans really let him shine, and he got some great coaching down there.
I think Bortles has a chance. I don't think he'll ever be elite, but I think he can do enough, especially with Jacksonville and the way Jacksonville's defense is set up, especially like you and me have talked about. I think Tom Coughlin came in there and just turned that whole culture around.
True. I mean, the Jacksonville had a pretty decent base for their defense to start with. They've drafted very well defensively.
Yes, they have.
And going back to Bortles real quick, I mean, he's got the running game now. You got Fournette, who is a fantastic running back.
76 yards.
And that's just for the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you got a pretty decent little receiving core down there. It's not horrible. It's not great. It could be better, but they still have they had some pretty decent receivers down there, and they got a decent tight end. You want to try and bump that stuff up a little bit, through the draft or through free agency. It's very conceivable to see, maybe you give Bortles a little more support, and maybe he starts to come around a little bit. I think a lot of it's the relationship between the quarterback and the wide receiver, and them being on the same page, knowing, hey, if this is happening, then I'm going to go and do this, et cetera, et cetera.
If you look, let's see, the Jacksonville Jaguars, their offense was ranked 5, and their defense was ranked number 2, which is incredible. Everybody underestimated the Jacksonville Jaguars, and being that I'm a Texans fan and we're in the AFC together, I really, really am surprised at what they were able to do. They were able to keep their opponents. The total opponents was points for their opponents was 268. which is very, very good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're rushing. We had talked about it. Let's see, Fournette on 268 rushing attempts, he rushed for 1,040 yards, which means they have a 1,000-yard rusher. Which any team that has a 1,000-yard rusher, you got great possibilities on your offense because it opens up the running game. Because when you have a 1,000-yard rusher coming into the next season, what are people game planning for? They're game planning for that rush. And the fact that Bortles also was able to rush, not a lot, but for a quarterback, on 57 attempts, he rushed for 322 yards.
You're talking about overall for the season.
Yes.
I was going to say in the game, he only had I think it was -2 yards.
Yes, the game
rushing, but yeah, you're not looking for Bortles to run that much.
He just opens it up a little bit. So it's going to be rough for the Houston Texans next year.
It's going to be rough for the AFC South next year. I mean, you got Jacksonville coming back. They're returning. I have not had a chance to look at their free agents, but they have a chance at. They have a very young defense. The old man on the defense really is Paul Pelesny, who is a solid inside linebacker. But you also had to really love that hit that Barry Church put on Gronkowski. And that's another question. Yeah, will Gronkowski clear concussion protocol to make the Super Bowl? I mean, personally, 2 weeks should be plenty of time to clear that. But how many more hits like that can Gronkowski take? He's starting to get to the point where he's becoming injury prone every season.
To go and Minch, talk about Jaguars defense a little bit. You mentioned Paul Pelesny, but let's look at some other players. Calais Campbell
from the
U. He is going to the Pro Bowl. He is first team All-Pro.
Deservedly so.
He had 14 and a half sacks. And the man is 31 years old and playing at that high of a level as a defensive end.
He's at the tail end of his prime, but you're also talking about a guy who's 6'8", 6'9".
Yep.
So you're talking about a guy who could technically block the sun out for you if you give him the opportunity. But the guy's a beast coming off the end.
Another one, Dante Fowler.
Oh, yeah. And you got to love Miles Jack.
Absolutely. I mean, their defense is scary. Their defense is scary.
Barry Church, beast,
yes.
Strong safety, come up and just put the leather on you. And you got Marcel Darius plugging up the hole or plugging up the middle as your defensive tackle. Yeah, they got a great young defense.
They do. And then one injury that they had during the season I did want to discuss, and that was the loss of Allen Robinson.
Wide receiver? Sure.
Now imagine if he had stayed healthy.
Well, that would have added another piece.
Yes, it would have.
Could have made Bortles look a heck of a lot better than.
Yep, exactly. So, Texans fans, and this is from a Texans fan, we got to be scared next year. We got to be scared.
Or you just
to be.
One thing I will say about the AFC Championship game is the fact that I'm kind of surprised Jacksonville didn't pick up on it, but if you'd watched New England throughout the season, when Brady starts hitting Amendola, he's going to keep going back to Amendola until you stop Amendola, and they did very little to stop Amendola in that championship game. Amendola wound up having a great game for New England.
Now let's talk about the NFC Championship game, and that would be the Philadelphia Eagles at home versus the Minnesota Vikings. And the final score of that game was a blowout game, by the way, 38-7.
And Philadelphia held back at the end.
Yes, they did. Their best quarter was the second when they had 17 points in the second quarter.
I think they could have had more in the fourth quarter if they really wanted to, but they kind of pulled back a little bit at the end. Now, one great stat that a lot of people may not know from this game, as far as dome teams go, dome teams playing in the NFC Championship, well, in any championship, in an NFL championship game, any dome team playing in an outdoor stadium is 0-12 in an outdoor stadium.
Oh, wow.
And that's for AFC and NFC championship games. So great little stat there. A lot of people probably didn't know that, but I had Philadelphia in this game. I know there were a lot of people here in Houston who were going for Minnesota due to Case Keenum, who had a fantastic year and probably made himself a ton of money coming up here in free agency for the Vikings. But Case Keenum had a heck of a season, had a heck of a playoff run. Unfortunately, Eagles playing at home. God knows those fans are loud and unruly and just having way too much fun up there. It was proven after the game. Some of the footage was pretty entertaining. Some of the Philadelphia fans.
Are we talking about the one that ran into the pole in Subway?
There were 2 instances of that, and on top of everything else, from what I understand, they even greased the light poles in downtown to keep people from climbing up the light poles. And guess what?
People still climb the light poles.
Didn't work.
Yep.
They still figured out. They used Crisco on the light poles to keep people from climbing up there. And they
people
still
just looked at it as a challenge.
And on top of that, I saw footage of a four-wheeler going up the steps of the Philadelphia museum where they have the Rocky statue.
Ah, the Rocky steps.
I mean, they were having fun. They were celebrating their team getting there for the first time in 14 years. Now that Philadelphia defense, if they can put the same type of pressure on Tom Brady as they put on Case Keenum, and I fully believe that Philadelphia is capable of coming up with a game plan to put pressure on Brady. And let's be realistic here. You put pressure on Brady, Brady does not like that, especially you start knocking him down a couple times, and it kind of throws his game off. So you got to wonder what kind of defensive scheme they're going to come up with to take out Brady in the Super Bowl.
You know, that defense really shut Minnesota down. Stephon Diggs, the savior. The Stephon Diggs, the one that got him to the championship game. He only had one catch for 12 yards.
And he was frustrated. You saw him getting into trouble at the end of the game.
Yes.
He didn't like the fact he got shut down. And
it showed.
I'm going to give him, okay, yes, they beat the Saints. And they beat the Saints due to
a miracle throw.
Well, I'd say it was more like sloppy tackling and not basically making.
He did try to tackle too early.
Well, you made you were going for a big hit type of tackle, and there was nobody behind you to cover your ass, so to speak, in case you missed. Which, what happened? You missed. Not only did you miss, you wound up missing, and you allowed Diggs to basically skate into the end zone, and brought the Vikings to Philadelphia. Now, I'm not saying that New Orleans would have had any better chance. Maybe they would have. Maybe they wouldn't have. But, if we're a fifth, we'd all be drunk, right? So, Minnesota got to the NFC Championship. They had their opportunity. First time that Minnesota would have been there since, God knows, probably the 70s or 80s. I need to probably look that up, so I'm not just guessing. But we know it's been a long, long time since Minnesota has made it this far into the playoffs. And they are one of the few teams that's never won a Super Bowl.
I mean, if you look at the drives, Eagles only had to punt three times. They had to punt 3 times. They had 4 touchdowns and a field goal. Minnesota, much different story. They had 1 touchdown They had to punt 3 times. They had a fumble. They had 2 interceptions. And then they also had 2 turnover on downs. That's rough. I mean, there's no way you'll ever win a game with drives that you cannot finish.
Well, the other really incredible stat here, Minnesota had 3 total turnovers. Philadelphia, 0. You're going to win a game if you can get the other team to turn the ball over 3 times and you don't give it up at all. Not to mention the fact their time of possession, they had almost 10 minutes. It was good, solid 9 minutes more time of possession than Minnesota did. And when you do that, especially against an offense like Minnesota's that can score extremely quickly, that's going to go a long way in winning the game. Plus, you also had Philadelphia, like you said, 10 of 14 on third down conversions. Minnesota only 6 of 13. When you're making 10, you're making what, you're making more than 3/4 of your third down conversions. Yeah, you're just grinding the clock.
Yes, and that Philly D shut the running game down too. I mean, on 18 attempts, Minnesota was only able to get 70 yards.
And no scores from the rushing game.
Yeah, nothing.
And Philadelphia, in the meantime, they're sitting there running it 30 times, 110 yards rushing, and they did get a touchdown.
You know, one thing I will say about this game is it was not a heavy penalty game. There was a total of 6 penalties. 2 by Minnesota for 19 yards, 4 for Philly for 55 yards. That's actually not bad when it comes to the penalties.
No, that's some pretty good
stats.
football. That's pretty good football from both teams, and I know we had kind of glossed over it a little bit on the previous game. Yeah, this is championship football. You shouldn't be seeing a ton of penalties in these games.
Let them play.
But yeah, you gotta say, Philadelphia's defensive coordinator basically figured out a plan to shut down Minnesota, and Philadelphia basically just torched. I mean, they just torched. They made the Minnesota secondary look like chumps.
They did. There is no doubt about that. You have to hand it to, like you were saying, you have to hand it to Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator. He did a hell of a job. But then you also got to look at Frank Reich?
Yeah, Frank Reich.
Yeah.
Former quarterback, I believe, for Buffalo for a while, and been a coach for quite a while now too.
Yes, he is now the offensive coordinator. He was a quarterback, threw right-handed.
Why is it all those quarterbacks always make head coaches?
That depends on what kind of coach. I mean, if you want a defensive coach, then I guess you wouldn't be going quarterback.
Well, I hate to bring them up, but both Saban and Belichick, defensive secondary.
Why do you bring those names into my studio?
I'm sorry, I desecrated the studio.
God,
yeah, it's
Belichick I can deal with, but I don't want the S name mentioned.
It's kind of like the Sith Lord and
my God,
the
Emperor,
dark Sith overlord with Darth Vader at his side, but Vader kind of like branched off into a slightly lower.
Why are you trying to insult Darth Vader? All right. Well, the Super Bowl is on its way. Not this weekend, but next weekend.
Don't forget the skills competition and Pro Bowl this weekend. Plus, you got the Senior Bowl coming up, which if you're into the draft, you definitely want to catch the Senior Bowl. And you actually got a handful of players that played in the blue-gray game, and they're going to be playing this weekend in the Senior Bowl. But good chance to get a look at some of the upcoming talent that's going to be coming into the NFL.
Like your first round pick, which will be a quarterback. What will Cleveland do? We will talk about that, the Super Bowl, all next week on our Now, with the Super Bowl coming up, that means there are 30 teams that are now in their off season. And what happens during off season? What starts?
coaching.
Bingo, the coaching carousel. Now, to start talking about the coaching carousel, there are two jobs that still need to be filled. One that I'd like to talk about for a second is the Indianapolis Colts. They finally fired Chuck Pagano. Of course, I do believe that this year was more of a sympathy job.
What,
being
Pagano?
A survivor?
Yeah, I think Pagano's a good coach, but there are guys that make great coaches. There are guys that make great coordinators. Pagano, I think, had the locker room and just kind of lost it after he had his health problems. And even though there was a lot of sympathy out there for him, and needless to say, we want him to have a good recovery and speedy recovery from his cancer scare. However, is he a great head coach? Not really. He hasn't, since he lost his quarterback, and a lot of that is the fact that Andrew Luck has been beat up the last just about every year since he's been in the league.
And then when we bring up Andrew Luck, we've got to talk about, we got to put fault somewhere. Is it Pagano? Is it the old GM, which they finally got rid of?
I think it's the GM because he.
Or was it Irsay?
He never did. Yeah, but he never did anything to protect Luck. He refused.
Oh, the offensive line was atrocious.
He refused to go through free agency or to get anyone through free agency or the draft to protect Luck. And when you got a multi-million-dollar quarterback and a young arm, especially one that's coming into their prime, how do you not do something to protect your investment?
Oh, I agree. But, there's talk that Irsay is the one that actually went to Luck and said, well, maybe you don't need surgery. Why don't you go to this doctor? And then they pushed the surgery so he couldn't start the season. And the surgery didn't even work. And that's why he had to go to Europe and see what he could do with his shoulder there.
Stem cell therapy, which is what Tannehill wound up doing, even though I still say Tannehill went about it the wrong way. Instead of getting the knee surgery and then doing the stem cell therapy to enhance the recovery time, he just wound up doing the stem cell therapy and wound up blowing his knee out. But that's a different subject, and we're getting off track here. The fact of the matter is
no, hold on. I do like that stem cell talk though. Real quick, is a lot of these guys are going and doing the stem cell, which they're going to other countries because it's legal. And I think it should be. I mean, it works.
Medicine.
But here's the situation, though. Is it in a way, I wouldn't say cheating, but using the system to get by? Because if you're using stem cell procedures, a joint, let's say you're 35 years old and you're doing stem cell right
therapy?
On your shoulder. Let's say you're doing stem cells on your surgery. Well, then your shoulder is now that of a 24-year-old.
In that case, then
give me
a nice injection. Give me a nice injection of stem cells and let me turn the clock back to 24 years old.
I'd enjoy that too.
I don't know that necessarily is the case, but I think stem cell therapy used properly is a great way to come back from an injury if that's what you wish to do. I mean, because there's so many people.
So do you think it should only be used coming from an injury? Because it could be used just to rejuvenate joints and all that stuff.
Are we talking like human growth stuff, or are you talking?
I wouldn't say it's not human growth hormones or anything like that. I'm saying stem cells. Let's say you have David Clowney, his knees just totally destroyed. Okay, I can understand.
That's a perfect example of where you should use stem cell therapy because the knee procedure that Jadeveon Clowney,
the microfracture
that he went through, that microfracture surgery, a lot of times from what the results have been, you're talking usually at least a year's recovery time from that, and that's without using any kind of stem cell therapy or anything like that. Plus, you usually come back at 2/3 to 3/4 of the strength and or flexibility that you had previously. So what Jadeveon Clowney has done, since he had that microfracture surgery this past season, he came out and he had a heck of a year. He started to show it last year, and I'm going on record here. You know, I had said the first couple of years, you never draft somebody first overall that's injured. I mean, you're basically drafting somebody to sit on your bench for a season, possibly two, and that's exactly what happened with Clowney. He was never able to get on the field his first 2 years, and he's actually come back, and he's played remarkably well considering the surgeries and the injuries that he's had his first couple of years. His senior year of college and his first couple of years in the league.
Yeah, so it's I like the stem cell procedure if used properly. I'm scared that it can start being used when it really shouldn't or doesn't need to be.
Example?
All right, so we talked about Clowney. Let's say you just have a tear, a minor tear.
A meniscus tear.
Exactly. That, rehab, all that, it's not career-ending. It's not detrimental. It is harmful, and it's going to take you a little while to come back after it's fixed. But does that really need stem cell?
I don't think so. Mainly, I know you've had knee issues before, and I believe you had a meniscus tear on top of that. A lot of times, that's like a floating body under your kneecap, which can be removed, and
yes, exactly.
That will resolve the issue. But stem cells, to me, like when you're replacing an ACL, or say you've totally blown your knee out, you blew out all three ligaments, ACL, MCL, PCL. Something like that is going to help you recover quicker and get you back into the gym, or at least get you back into a state where you can function properly without a cane or without crutches. And just getting back into the gym and rebuilding a little bit of strength in there is gonna do wonders for you. So I think stem cells used properly are a definite pro, and so long as they're not abused, and I'm not really sure how you would go about abusing them. There's probably a way, and I'm not smart enough to figure it out. But yeah, I'm sure somebody will figure out a way to abuse it somehow, because everyone always, people always figure out, hey, what's the best way we can.
Now, to get back talking about the Colts coaching job, the front runner for that position is Josh McDaniels, who is currently the offensive coordinator for New England. So we're not going to really hear anything strongly about that till after the Super Bowl. What do you think, Phil?
Well, I think a lot of teams are going to wait till after the Super Bowl, or at least teams that have openings, because you can't really do anything as far as signing somebody. Nobody's going to leave their team to go join a team that's out of the playoffs if you're already in there. You want to get that Super Bowl ring. But I think I know both coordinators for New England have been mentioned for jobs, and it's very likely that New England loses both their offensive and defensive coordinator at the end of the season. And would the Colts be well off hiring Josh McDaniels? Yes. They would probably be well off doing it. The thing is will the front office work with them to rebuild that team? Because right now, I think you're looking at probably a couple-year rebuilding project as far as Indianapolis goes. They need an offensive line. Their running backs aren't getting any younger.
And that you're talking about rebuilding, and that's even if Luck can come in. And if Luck can no longer play the way Luck can, that's even a longer rebuilding period. So would a coach want to get in on that?
Well, I think the better question is does Luck want to stick around?
If I was Luck, I'd want out of Indy.
I mean,
Indy's the one that did it to him.
They've done nothing. They've done nothing to help Luck. They haven't done anything as far as like building an offensive line for him. Their doctors have messed him up. He's got shoulder problems now. I think the first chance he gets to get out of there, I think he's gone.
I'd leave. I would.
Especially with Irsay. Irsay's not been exactly greatest owner slash general manager. And I mean, on top of that, you're talking about a guy with a substance abuse problem. And I know he's supposedly gotten help, but you know how easy it is to fall back into that kind of stuff.
Especially in the position he's in with the money he has. It's
the ego.
Yes. Oh, dear Lord. So, congratulations if Josh McDaniels does get the position. That's a very rough position to get.
Well, he will prove himself if he can do something with them and turn them around. Then
you've got a management that's extremely stubborn and hard-headed. You've got a management system there that kept a GM and a coach together. That, I mean, the media even talked about it. They did not work. The coach, Pagano, wanted one thing, the GM wanted another, and the GM would win, but the GM would lose because he won. If y'all can understand how I meant that. I hope y'all can, because I really don't want to explain it. Y'all all should know how I meant that. The next team is the Detroit Lions. And
Rock
the
City.
interesting fact about the Detroit Lions is they are looking at Josh McDaniels' coaching teammate, Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator. Phil, what do you think about this one?
Patricia is well liked by his defense. I think he's a young guy who has a lot of potential. And with the Lions, the Lions are going to be probably looking at running back in the draft. I know that's definitely one of the positions they're going to be looking at. And I think he has potential to do well there. And they have a pretty decent defense too. So let's see what they can do. And if they decide to hire Patricia after the Super Bowl, I don't think it's a horrible hire. I think it's pretty decent.
I agree. He's a great defensive mind. My thing is, what about his maturity level? I mean, we're talking about a man who did come into a press conference wearing a Goodell clown shirt. He's known to just kind of be off the wall, and do you think that would be a problematic issue for a head coach?
No, not really, because you look back at some of the characters that have been in the coaching ranks. Heck, look at the Ryan brothers. Hell, look at Buddy Ryan, for example. They're not exactly known as being the most even-keeled folks there, and God knows, they got their love of toes and feet and all that good stuff, but
their New England's defense was pretty impressive this year.
I believe they were 5th overall or in the league, which is pretty surprising, but nonetheless, that's still pretty phenomenal.
Yes, they were ranked 5th, which is very, very impressive.
Well, considering you got 27 teams behind them. And this is what makes it real interesting, and I'm going back to the Super Bowl here, but the fact of the matter is, I've always said, especially when it comes to the Super Bowl, defense wins championships, and you're going to hear this next week when we talk Super Bowl, but defense wins championships. You got the number 4 defense in Philadelphia, and then you got the number 5 defense with New England. So it's really going to come down to which offense can perform better. But
I do think Patricia has a chance. If you look, New England's defense this year kept their opponents to 5.7 yards per play. They had 18 turnovers. They were able to take away 6 fumbles. So they have a big chance, and I do like it. I do think Matthew Stafford is going to be on his way out soon. They've tried that experiment, and I just don't think it's working now, especially now that Megatron's been retired for, 2-3 years now?
He's not coming back.
He's not coming back. They've tried it with Golden Tate. That didn't work. I think Detroit's chance is their defense and having a defensive-minded coach. I think that's what's going to help them right now.
Well, they have a solid defense, and that's been their strength. I mean, at least for the last couple of years since Megatron's been gone. And once again, if you got a stout defense, think about it. You're not giving up that many points, which means you don't have to rely on your offense to score a ton of points. And Detroit's one of those teams where one week they're scoring 30, 40 points, and the next week they're putting up 7 to 10 or 3 to 10.
Yes. Now the Indianapolis Colts and the Lions have not been filled. They are expected to be filled, but because both of those coaches are going into the Super Bowl, we're going to have to hold off and wait on those. Now, Arizona Cardinals have filled their opening, and they filled their opening because we have lost Bruce Arians. Bruce Arians has decided to retire, so he is no longer Arizona Cardinals coach. Real quick, I do want to talk a little bit about Bruce Arians because he was a pretty damn good coach. He did do 1 year. His first year as head coach was with the Indianapolis Colts. And the reason why is we just talked about it. He was the interim coach because of Chuck Pagano's cancer treatments. Then he ended up in 2013 going to the Arizona Cardinals, where he had Arizona was ranked number 3 in 13, 2 in 14, 1 in 15, 2 in 16, and 3 in 17. He's a pretty good coach. He was his career, he was 49 and 30. So he's leaving with a not a huge bit over 500, but at least he's out of the 500s. And then there's talk now he is interested in taking John Gruden's job on Monday Night Football. Would we want to listen to Bruce Arians nonstop? I mean, I guess in a way he'd be better than Gruden.
I think I would rather listen to Arians than Gruden. I mean,
he's not making love to every quarterback he sees.
Well, Gruden gets away with a lot of stuff, and I know we have that job on our coaching carousel.
Yes, we
list
will get
here.
to that.
And I don't know if you want to get into that right now.
Nope.
If you do, we can.
I've got a lot to talk about on that one.
I will hold off on Mr. Gruden, or sorry, Coach Gruden, if you will. Hey, if he decides to go onto ESPN and take if they hire him to take over the ESPN spot, then you know what? Hey, good for him. I hope he does well, and I'm going to look forward to listening to him. I don't think he can be any worse than Gruden. At least I hope not.
So, the coach that has been signed to replace Bruce Arians is Mr. Steve Wilkes.
Former DC from Carolina.
Yes, he's been defensive back coach since 2006, and in 2015 he added assistant head coach to his resume. But then this past year he became the defensive coordinator.
And how did the Panthers' defense look this past year?
Wasn't overly fantastic. I will say at times their defense looked better than their offense.
That wasn't saying a whole lot because
exactly.
The Panthers' offense was to me mediocre this year. Now it's going to be interesting because Carolina basically runs a 4-3 defense. And if memory serves me correctly, the Cardinals are built around a 3-4 defense. So do they have the personnel to pull that off? will they be drafting for a 4-3 defense as opposed to a 3-4 defense? And one good thing, I guess, if you will, as far as the out of the 6 seasons that Wilkes was with Carolina, the 5 of those seasons Carolina did finish in the top 10 in total defense. So he's got something in there. Panthers finished third in sacks this year with 50, and I believe they were third in run defense, only allowing just under 90 yards a game.
Let's see.
Another defensive back coach, or another former defensive back.
Yes, and it's another one-year coordinator that's given him another head coaching job.
Well, he was the assistant head coach, and then made defensive coordinator.
Yes,
2 seasons as assistant head coach / defensive backs coach. So
I think he has a chance. I think the Panthers can get out of their slump if Cam Newton can get out of his own ego.
Well, I think Cam Newton's biggest problem, and like you said, it is Cam Newton. The fact of the matter is, this is a guy who I guess has Peter Pan syndrome or something. He refuses to mature as a quarterback.
He thinks
he's mature, but he's not mature.
Yes, I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago. They were wearing a Panthers shirt, and so I went up to him and I talked to him a little bit about it, and I even said, I think y'all have a hell of a team. It's just Cam Newton has got to mature. He's been in for a while, but you hear him in press conferences. He makes excuses. Everything is an excuse, and it's not him. But then he's got to get out of his own ego. You see the way he dresses, and honestly, y'all want to get mad at me for talking about the way the man dresses. Y'all can get mad. You can tweet me. My Twitter handle is @JRWithSports. Throw it at me. All I'm saying is, when you're dressing the way he's dressing for attention.
Well, I agree with you. He definitely comes across as an attention-starved child, right, if you will. It's, hey, look at me, look what I'm wearing, or, did you see what I did? He never wants to take the blame for anything, but he'll certainly take the praise and admiration. And I'm sorry, you are the quarterback of an NFL team. You are the quote-unquote leader. Yeah, you got to take the bad with the good. You got a heck of a... He
pouts when he does bad.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you remember a couple years back in the Super Bowl, after the Super Bowl, it was like the only thing missing was him laying out on the ground and stomping and slamming his fists into the ground and throwing a tantrum. But it was pretty darn close to that, which, for a grown man, that's sad.
So, Mr. Wilkes, we wish you luck.
And the first thing Mr. Wilkes is going to wind up having to do, don't forget, is you're having to go and replace the quarterback through free agency or the draft.
Carson Palmer
retired.
Yep.
So, there's a guy who could replace Gruden in the booth and do pretty good. Just saying.
He would. I mean, you look at Kurt Warner and what Kurt Warner's been able to do on the NFL Network.
I'm not going to mention a certain former 4-lettered quarterback from up north, or north of us at least, who made some great gurgling noises during his call of the AFC Championship.
I didn't really listen to him during the season. He never did the Texans games, and usually after the Texans played, I put it on Red Zone so I could watch all the rest of the games.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there was a lot of sound effects in that championship game. So, Mr. Romo, can we...
He was entertaining.
Can we not make so many sound effects? I'd rather listen to the guy from Police Academy than you, because at least the sound effects will actually be good. So, like I said, Mr. Wilkes, good luck to you. Let's see. The Chicago Bears. They fired John Fox.
Big surprise.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on with John. He started off strong, and he can't find that team to help him out. But Chicago has signed Matt Nagy as their new head coach.
Off of that coaching tree of Andy Reid.
He has coached his entire NFL career under Andy Reid. His last job was offensive coordinator for Kansas City, which Kansas City's offense was on point. I think it had more to do with the ability of Hearns and Tyreek. Less scheme. I think it was just those guys are able to just break it away.
Look at who he's worked under.
Oh, absolutely.
Looking at Matt Nagy's coaching career.
Yes.
Started out with the Eagles under Reid. Wound up becoming he was an intern, then an assistant, then a quality control coach, and moved with Reid when he went to Kansas City. And he's also been able to learn with Brad Childress, not necessarily a great head coach, but pretty darn good offensive coordinator. And then after Childress left, he wound up taking over the reins. And with Reid, you got one of the best offensive minds in the game right now that he's been able to learn under for just eons.
I think this signing is great. I think it's truly fantastic, especially with Chicago having Trubisky.
Oh yeah, then that's the big thing, and that was kind of that's kind of another thing that we're going to be getting into with one of these other teams coming up. But he should do wonders with Trubisky. Once again, I think he's been under the Reid coaching tree long enough that he should do pretty darn good. And we'll find out. Let's see if the Bears can get it turned around and make some noise in the in the NFC North.
Good luck to you, Chicago. Y'all one of my teams. My dad was born and raised in Chicago, so I have to say it. The Bears.
The Bears.
So now we are going to go to the Northeast and go to the New York Giants.
The New York City Giants that actually don't even play in New York City. In
Correct.
fact, there's only one team that actually plays in New York, and that would be Buffalo.
So, New York. All right, I'm going to set up New York this way.
You're talking about one of the original teams of the NFL that's been around for eons. And old football ownership. The Maras are actually probably one of the better families to play for as far as the old school football families. So go ahead and hit me with what you got.
This year, the New York Giants were an absolute joke. I think they were the joke of the NFL this year. Yeah, people want to say Cleveland. No, everybody knew Cleveland was going to suck it up this year. We just didn't know how bad they were going to suck it up.
Certainly not 0-16 worth.
Yes. Welcome to the Detroit Lions ranking group, Cleveland. So we have a coach in Ben McAdoo who knows the whole rest of the season is gone. There's no way they can make the playoffs. So what does the man do? He decides to make a roster change at starting freaking quarterback. You have Eli Manning. Eli Manning with the streak of consecutive games. What was it, 220?
220 games. He would have been 221, but no. We're going to replace you
Yes.
with Geno Smith.
And then, you have... That was his excuse. That was Ben McAdoo's excuse. Well, I want to see the other quarterbacks we have.
We already know that Geno
What do you
Smith
mean? You
sucks.
got a third-string quarterback who I don't even remember his name. Then you got Geno Smith. We all know how Geno Smith is. The man got punched out by his own teammate for not paying up on a bet. We know how he plays, and you're going to tell me that you're going to bench a 2-time Super Bowl champion and Super Bowl MVP for Geno freaking Smith. So what did management end up doing? After the 12th game, they fired Ben McAdoo. On 12/04, Ben McAdoo was fired. Rightfully so. But what happened? That was the week that Eli Manning was benched. All of a sudden, that next week, Eli Manning's playing, but guess what? The streak is over.
Well, it was the week after that he decided to bench. It was the week after he decided to bench Eli. And, boy, I mean, talk about foot and ass disease.
Oh, it was a shit show.
Now, the interesting thing with the Giants is, I don't know if you know who they hired as their GM, right? Dave Gentleman, former GM for the Panthers. I like this hire. I like the GM hire that the Giants did. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Schumer, who's essentially known as a quarterback guru, one of several in the league.
Pat Schumer, for all y'all that don't know.
It's going to be real interesting to see what happens as far as the draft goes, because indications right now are that the Giants are going to be strongly looking at quarterback. So do they try to sign Eli, who's going to be 37, or who is 37 already, going on 38 next year? Are they going to keep him for another season and try and work in a quarterback, at least try and let him learn something under Manning? Or are they going to let Manning go and just go ahead and do what a lot of teams have been doing nowadays, and that's basically drafting a quarterback and throwing him to the wolves?
I think it'll depend on what quarterback is available. But
Number 2 pick overall.
I also think
you got one of the two Los Angeles quarterbacks, USC or UCLA. You're gonna have the kid from Wyoming. You got Josh Allen. You also have Baker Mayfield. There's a plethora of quarterbacks in this draft, and at number 2, you damn near have your pick of them.
I would save Eli and let Eli, because like I said, he's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP and champion. How you can't pass that up, even if it's for 1 year. You let the man stay. You teach a young quarterback through his tutelage. You can't throw that talent away unless you can get something for him. You can't throw that talent away.
Oh, I agree with you. I think you let Manning. I think Manning. Yeah, he's going to have maybe 2-3 years tops.
I even say he goes in 1 more year. He teaches the other guy, and he walks out with his brother.
And I think that's the most likely scenario, is that he's probably going to play 1, possibly 2 more seasons. But you know what? Retain the guy. Let your draft pick learn under him, because love him or hate him, Eli and Peyton are probably 2 of the more prepared quarterbacks in the NFL. And that's not to say that there aren't other quarterbacks that are just as prepared, if not more, but they know how to do it, and they should be able to pass that along.
And I would like to, on one quick last note about Pat Shermer and the Giants signing as head coach, is what put him on the map this year was Mr. Case Keenum helped put him on the map this year, because Pat Shermer was Minnesota's offensive coordinator.
And just to bring up 2 quick little points here. A, he's a player's coach. Players love him. And B, another guy off the Andy Reid coaching tree.
Now the moment I've been waiting for. We are going to discuss the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders fired their coach, Jack Del Rio, at the end of regular season. I think it was a wrong choice. I don't think Del Rio was that bad of a coach. He had a very rough season. They went 6-10, but you got to look. Last year they went 12-4. I think he is a good coach, but that's enough about Jack Del Rio. So, many of y'all know mean, how not? It was on every news station, including CNN and Fox Sports and Fox News channels, C-SPAN, whatever the hell you want to put it on. This news was fucking on it. Oakland Raiders have signed John Gruden out of the ESPN Monday Night Football booth. John Gruden, where did we get in coaching where there's no patience anymore, for one? A coach could have a great season. You look at Jack Del Rio, 12-4. The only reason why he didn't make it last year is because Carr went down. If he didn't have that injury, they would have had a better record. And 12-4 is not a horrible record. You're in double-digit wins. That's playoff contention right there. You got a man who hasn't coached in 10 years. 10 years. Yes, I can understand. The man won a Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl back in 2002 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who did he beat? He beat the team he got traded from in the Oakland Raiders, which he is now going back to. Again, the problem I have with this is, where did we get to a point where automatically one Super Bowl and you're this god of a coach? Every year since the man left in 2008, when we talk about the coaching carousel, there's always a team that has its radar on him, or the media's talking about him getting signed by this one, and he stays in the booth. Okay? That's problem number one for me. He wins the Super Bowl. He sticks around for another 6 years. Well, in those 6 years, his record was, he was .509. So he was just an inch over 500.
That was with Tampa. That was straight up with Tampa. He was
after the Super Bowl win.
11 years total coaching. Basically a 540 winning percentage.
Exactly.
So he's barely above barely above 500. 95-81 lifetime as far as coaching goes. And in the playoffs, 5-4.
So you look at those stats, and the man's been, like I said, coaching for 10 years. He's been this quote-unquote quarterback guru. We're also talking about a quarterback guru, quote-unquote, who said the Houston Texans should draft Johnny Manziel. What kind of shit show would that have been if Johnny Manziel had stayed in Texas?
That was the entire reason I said that if Dallas or Houston had drafted Manziel, it'd be the worst thing for him. And hell, I mean, who thought that Cleveland would be even worse? But apparently it was.
Well, this is a quote unquote coaching quarterback guru that said he'd be great.
If he had stayed in Texas, it would have been.
He'd be dead.
I don't know if he would have been dead. But no, I think he would have killed himself. The media would have had a field day with him.
I think he would have got drunk, OD'd, or something.
Driven into a tree or phone pole or something. Yeah.
So
hopefully not taking anyone else with him.
You have John Gruden's resume like that. And the man gets a 10-year in a time that good coaches are being fired because they had one bad season, possibly just because of injuries. You're going to bring back a coach who hasn't coached in 9 years for a $100 million 10-year deal. Unheard of in the NFL, but yet John Gruden gets this deal. Tom Coughlin is fired from New York because he had a bad season. And John Gruden gets signed to the ESPN booth for a $100,000 10-year deal, which I guarantee you, he goes, I'm going to say this now, I'm going to go I'm going under 5 years.
I don't know. I honestly, because Mark Davis loves John Gruden. He's been trying to figure out a way to hire him since his father passed away, and his father actually did like John Gruden quite a bit. But Mark Davis, just has a major hard-on for John Gruden. And I think the biggest thing is to me, I think they made a joke of the Rooney Rule. I mean,
oh, absolutely. They knew off the bat who they were going for. They didn't interview anybody else.
I mean, from what I'm understanding, Davis met with Gruden prior to Christmas and basically said, hey man, I want you as my coach. I'll give you what you want to become the coach. Hence the 10-year, $100 million ridiculous contract. Does he last more than 5 years? Possibly. Let's see what he does with Derek Carr in the next year. If he can actually get Derek Carr to stay healthy, which is not really Gruden's problem, but if Gruden can get Carr, turn him into an elite quarterback, then maybe it'll be justified. But right now, I think if he lasts more than 3 years, I'll be really surprised. And the scary part is that if I remember correctly, that 10-year contract is guaranteed.
It's absolutely preposterous. John, Mr. Gruden, Coach Gruden, Analyst Gruden, Commentator Gruden, whatever the hell you want to be called. If you're listening to this, my Twitter is JR with Sports. That is at JR with Sports. You can come and talk to me and tell me I'm wrong, but I don't believe you deserve $100 million, especially if it's guaranteed. Not at all.
Well, coaches' contracts are a lot different than player contracts, and there's only three players right now on the Raiders that basically are making more than John, and one of those, of course, is Derek Carr. Then you have Kalichi Asumali and Gabe Jackson. Now, I'm not seeing. I believe that contract is guaranteed. I was trying to find something to confirm that, and I've not been able to. But nonetheless, $10 million a year. What have you done? What have you done for me lately? You've been on ESPN making heinous choices in quarterbacks, saying whether they're good or bad, and you're basically shaping the direction that teams are going for these quarterbacks. And for that matter, you're shaping the direction that these kids are going that are coming straight out of college and telling them, hey, you're really on the ball, or hey, you suck, or whatever. But, dude, a lot of times from what I've heard on ESPN, you've not been on point with what you said. And, we'll find out. Prove us wrong. Please prove us wrong. Make the Raiders great again.
Well, we're going to be making the Raiders great again in Las Vegas, and that's another reason why I think this may actually be a a publicity grab. I mean, they got one more year in Oakland, and then they're supposed to be going to Las Vegas, right? It was 2 years.
Yes,
Two-year
they should be going to Vegas after this upcoming 2018-2019 season, and. Hey, what better way to get some fans interested than bringing back Gruden and bringing them to Vegas?
Season tickets.
Let's bring the John Gruden show to Las Vegas and see what happens, and that's going to be a beautiful stadium.
And then when he fails and he doesn't make his 10 years, he's already in Vegas. Create your own show, go on stage, because I don't really want to hear you back on ESPN.
I think the MGM will sign him. Maybe they'll pick up the rest of that 10-year, $10 million or $100 million contract.
There you go.
He can
have him commentate for Cirque du Soleil.
I was going to say, just hire him, put him in the gambling room, the betting area, the bullpen, if you will, and let him throw out advice to would-be bettors.
Yeah. Oh, John, not a fan of you. Well, I am. I just don't like this. I think it's a stupid hire. I think it's an expensive hire. I'm just flabbergasted that with the coaching nowadays being so fickle that you're going to hire a coach who has not coached in 9 years. And even when he did coach his last 7 years, he was literally a fingertip above 500. And you're going to give him 10 years, $100 million. With the way the coaching climate is now, I don't understand it.
The one thing I will say about the Raiders, as far as the Raiders go, once you've been a Raider, and especially if they love you, you're essentially family. And if you want a job and you go back to the Raiders and say, hey, yeah, I want to work for you again, they will hire you in a New York second, just like that. So I think that has a little bit to do with it. And like I said, Mark Davis had an absolute hard-on for John Gruden, hence that hire. I don't necessarily agree with getting rid of Jack Del Rio, but yeah, we'll find out. Let's see where Del Rio winds up, because at worst he could wind up making some teams very happy as a defensive coordinator.
We're gonna go to
another joke hire.
This is kind of to my heart. The Houston Texans have lost their defensive coordinator to our rival, the horrible Tennessee Titans. Now, the Tennessee Titans, they just made it to the playoffs, and they decided to get rid of Mike Mularkey. To me, that's a lot of malarkey. You like how I did that? You like
Absolutely.
How I did that?
And part of it was because they couldn't come to an extension.
They couldn't come to an extension. So I understand that. It is what it is. But they have signed Mike Vrabel. Like I've told friends, because I do work for Sports Radio 610, and people always ask me, Jake, what do you think about this? Mike Vrabel, I wish you good luck on your future endeavors, but I have no tears. The reason I have no tears is, to me, he's unproven. He's just like we talked about Josh McDaniels, Matt Patricia, Steve Wilkes.
I'd be more comfortable making those hires than Vrabel.
I can definitely give you that. I think, to me, he's unproven. This was his first year as defensive coordinator. Yeah, he was a hell of a great linebacker coach. You got Clowney, Merciless, Watt. They say he was great linebacker coach, which I'll give you. But he became defensive coordinator this year for the Houston Texans. And people want to say, oh, well, Brian Cushing was out with a suspension. Well, what's new about that one? Then you had Watt injury. Well, that happened last year under Romeo Crennel, and he was still able to get our defense number one. Then you had Merciless, big hit, combined, big hit. But to me, it wasn't even the injuries. It was the schemes. Vrabel's defensive schemes sucked. We didn't have a good secondary under Crennel. We had a shitty secondary under Vrabel. To me, his schemes didn't work. And when you sign a defensive-minded coach, you got to look at their schemes. You got to. We had we got Davian Clowney. We had Cunningham coming in for Cushing. We had good players.
Well, Zach Cunningham had first-round grades coming into the draft this year as it was. And
speaking about his position, we need to get rid of Cushing anyway.
I mean, they got him in the second round, which really was a steal. Plus, the year before, they got McKinney.
Yes.
Another great linebacker, inside linebacker. As far as inside linebackers go, Texans should be pretty well set at that. And the thing about Vrabel right now, I mean, okay, yeah, he's a player's coach. He apparently has leadership. What I hope he's bringing to Tennessee, at least if I'm a Tennessee fan, is I hope he has the leadership, organization, and ability to delegate that he's going to need to have to run that team, or any team for that matter. And yes, he played in New England under Belichick, and for that matter, Crennel. And he was a sound linebacker, but let's see what I'm going to be real curious to see whether the Titans regress in the upcoming season. And I think one of the biggest things they're going to have to do is they're going to have to get somebody in there to work with Mariota who can develop Mariota, because right now Mariota needs some development. Now, we do have coaches that some should not be there, but guarantee you next season coming in, they're going to be on the hot seat. They're going to have to start off hot, and they're going to have to maintain it. They're going to have to do a heck of a lot better than what they've done this past year. And some of those names are essentially, you got Hugh Jackson from the Browns, You got Jason Garrett from the Cal Chips. Sorry, Cowboys, if you will. Cal Chips, my vernacular. Vance Joseph probably needs to come back in and do something with Denver. Bill O'Brien, once again, starting off on the hot seat. Todd Bowles probably got one more chance. And Dick Kotner with Tampa. Yeah, probably also on the hot seat, but they were pretty close to making the playoffs. And the one guy who I still can't believe has his job and probably is really seriously on the hot seat. I mean, I thought he was gone this year, but you know who I'm talking about, Jake.
Oh, my God. How is Marvin Lewis still the coach of the Cincinnati Bengals or Bungles, my vernacular?
When did he make the playoffs the last time?
He made the playoffs last in 2015. But even more than that, he's been to the playoffs 7 times, doesn't have a single victory.
Never advanced out of the first round of the playoffs.
Never advanced out of the first round of the playoffs. The man's been a coach for 14 years. You've been 7 times. 14 years. So that's only half of his coaching career has he made it to the playoffs, and he has not won a single playoff game since he's been.
That's not even like always the bridesmaid, never the bride. That's like, hey, I got invited to like 14 weddings, and I just sat in the audience and cried my ass off.
Yeah. Again, I have to go back because to me he was a good coach, and he's done wonders with Jacksonville. You have New York getting rid of Tom Coughlin after one bad season. I wouldn't even call it. That wasn't even a bad one. It was more mediocre season than bad. This last one was bad under Ben McAdoo.
Well, now I think part of the issue there was he was the coach of the Giants, and I think he had an issue with the GM, which I believe was Jerry Reese at the time.
Yes, it was.
And they didn't want to get rid of Jerry Reese, so he basically said, hey, that's it. I'm done. I'm out of here.
Exactly.
And went down to Jacksonville and got the GM and total control position.
And Marvin Lewis still has a job. It goes back to the fact which there is one coach that I am very thankful is out and looks like will remain out, and that is Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher to me is the same that Marvin Lewis is.
You have working for ESPN?
You have showed me nothing. How are you getting another 2 years? It's not even they're going to extend him 1. They're giving him another 2-year extension. And the problem to me with Marvin Lewis is his culture sucks. The locker room sucks. You have a team that has Pac-Man Jones and Burfict that do not mind the penalties that they get for brutal hits. They don't care about the fines. They don't care about any of that.
Well, it's not even brutal hits. It's meathead. It's meathead plays that they're doing, and it's not just on the field. It's off the field.
Exactly. And
Pac-Man
Marvin
Jones
has not done
had
anything.
more brushes with the law than you got fingers. So
it dumbfounds me that a man that can't get his locker room under control and can't win a single playoff game.
Now, you remember what I was saying about team ownership as far as families that own teams? This is one of those teams that you got family ownership, but they do a horrible job of running their team. The Browns are the Browns that own the Cincinnati Bengals, the Brown family, are known as just being, tight asses, if you will. I mean, they don't want to pay their players. They have a really unique, bizarre way of running their team, and that's the way it's been ever since. And don't get me wrong, because Paul Brown, who is basically the patriarch of the family, apparently he didn't pass anything down because these guys don't have a clue how to run shit.
I mean, let's take a look a little bit at Marvin Lewis's stats a little bit. So Marvin Lewis has been coaching since 2003 with the Bengals. I keep wanting to say Bungles because that's my pronunciation for this crappy-ass team.
Fitting.
So his first 2 years, he went 8-8. In 2005, he went 11-5. They went to the wild card, and what happened? Of course, they lost. Then he went 8-8, 7-9. 4-11 in 08. In 09, he made it back to the playoffs, and he lost in the wild card round.
Talk about your seesaw seasons here. 4-11, 10-6, 4-12.
Exactly. Then you have it back in 2011. He went 9-7, made it to the wild card. But what happened in that wild card game? That's
lost.
right. He lost to the Houston Texans 31-10. And that was when we had Mr. Gary Kubiak and, TJ Yates was the quarterback for that game. Okay? So, and that was what? What did I say? That was 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say he did go on a nice consecutive run till 2015, going into the playoffs. But in 2012, he lost to the Texans again. In 13, he lost. And he has had a chance to be great. I mean, you look at 2011 to now, his number one receiver is Green. Hell of a receiver.
A.J. Green.
Exactly. And Andy Dalton is not that horrible of a quarterback. I think he has the possibility of being a good quarterback. It's just the coaching sucks.
He's a good game manager.
Exactly. And then if you look at the offensive and defensive ranks of his teams, this past year in points they were 26. In yards they were fast. They were last in yardage.
And that was coming down from the previous year. I mean, they were 13th.
Yes.
And that was in a 6-9-1 season. They were 13th overall in offense, and they plummeted.
I mean,
the next year they plummet from 13 to 32.
And then if you look in 2015, their offensive was 7 in points. And then all of a sudden in 16, they plummet to 24. And then in 17, they go down even more to 26. How does this man still have a job? That's just mild stats we're telling y'all about. Just mild stats. If y'all want to look at these stats, go to profootballreference.com. You can see all these stats, and y'all can even tell why this man should not still be Cincinnati Bengals coach. If he was released and another team wanted to hire him, I wouldn't say that would be a great choice, but I could understand it. It's more realistic to me,
but it's more of the same recycling
on the
of
same team.
It's more of the same recycling of the same guys that are already out there too.
Yes, but at least to me, that would be more understandable than a coach still coaching a team he has not been able to do anything with. The regular season, ladies and gentlemen, I really need to stress this to everybody. The regular season gets you a record. That record puts you in seeding. That seeding puts you in playoff contention. That's all the regular season does. So yeah, he went 12-4 in 2015. But what does he have to show for it? Nothing. He lost in the wild card round, which means you didn't achieve anything. You wasted all your opportunity during that season. It's the postseason that truly matters. It's like preseason. Preseason doesn't matter. The rankings, the records don't even count. Yes, regular season, your record counts, but it doesn't matter if you don't make it in the postseason.
Well, it doesn't matter, especially if you aren't one of the top 2 seeds in the playoffs. I mean, basically, if you aren't one of the top 2 seeds and you get that first week bye, basically everyone's record starts off all over again. You're 0-0 and 1 loss, and you're gone. Exactly. Only thing that's going to affect is your place in the draft. And if you look at the defensive rankings, you were talking about the offense. The Bengals defense in 2011, from 2011 to 2013, 3 consecutive years, you're talking about top 10 defense. And in 2013, they were actually the third, as far as yards given up. They were third in the league as far as least number of yards given up. Now, from that point on, their defense, and this kind of goes back to another thing that we'd mentioned before, but the last 4 years for the Bengals defense, it's been 22 in yards allowed, then 11, then 17 and 18. You're not gonna win a whole lot of games when you have a defense that is giving up that many yards. When you're in the bottom half of the league and giving up yards, you're not very often going to wind up being in the playoffs, or at least going far.
But here's the big thing about that, too, and it goes back to culture. Do you know where they lose a lot of their yards?
Penalties.
Personal fouls.
Absolutely.
Not even just offsides or anything. It is full-blown perfect,
and it's not
should be ejected type plays.
That's just it, though. And it's not like it's a multitude of players that are getting these personal fouls. It's the same characters over and over again.
Yes, exactly. Well, I can drone on about how Marvin Lewis keeping his job is atrocious, but we got to move on.
And we do have something near and dear to our hearts to talk about here.
So, at the beginning of the show, I teased y'all a story that really isn't a joke. It's more serious. Seeing how I report and talk about sports, I can't not watch the Super Bowl. I can't not watch football. I can't boycott football like fellow vets can. Do I wish I could? Honestly, kind of. It can make me turn into NHL because hopefully Houston's getting a team, so I need to start watching anyway. It would move me to basketball. But I can't. It's my job. This is what I do. This is what I love doing. Everybody knows, and I'm not going to jump into it, because if y'all have listened to the show before, y'all know how we can go off on Colin Kaepernick. But this topic goes into that. So everybody knows Colin Kaepernick knelt for the flag. So then this past year, everybody was kneeling, but the water got muddied because everybody was kneeling for their own personal grievances instead of what Kaepernick was actually kneeling for, which I agree on with the reason why he did it. So I'm going to explain to y'all what's going on. And the organization, national organization called AMVETS, had an ad that they wanted put into the Super Bowl handbook program. And what it is it is a military member holding the American flag, and it says, in the blue sky, it says, #please stand. To me, I think it's a great ad. It's a quiet ad, but it's a very strong ad. Not much on it. It does mention at the bottom, make a $20 tax-deductible donation to help veterans by texting veterans to 444-999. And the only reason why I am saying that, because as Ferocious Phil knows, I'm not going to pump you out if you're not giving anything to me or the show. I'm not going to pimp your name out. But because it's AMVETS, I'll pimp your name out. And so they wanted this page to be in the program for the Super. In their almighty glory, rejected the ad.
Why?
They rejected the ad because they said it was too politicalized, and the Super Bowl game program is designed for fans to commemorate and celebrate the game, players, teams, and the Super Bowl, says NFL spokesman Brian McCarthy. He also says it's never been a place for advertising that could be considered by some as a political statement. The NFL has long supported the military and veterans and will again salute our service members in the Super Bowl with memorable on-field moments that will be televised as part of the game. So, this ad has also been approved by other leagues. The NHL, as for one, has run these ads in their programs.
As has the NBA.
Exactly. The NBA has too. Now, you want to look at an organization that says they don't want to get political, but yet the whole league is allowed to kneel a day after our president decided to talk about the football. How is that not political? How are you going to allow that?
Well, they've allowed other ads that could be considered political, such as like the VFW ad that was approved, and it read, "We stand for veterans." I'm not sure exactly how much different that really is compared to "Please stand," but I think the NFL is, this is absolutely untrue that they don't want political ads in their program, because there are multiple ads in there that could be considered political in that program.
McCarthy also said, "We look to work with the organization and asked to consider other options such as please honor our veterans. They chose not to, and we asked it to consider using please stand for our veterans. Production was delayed as we awaited an answer," he says. And as the program was going into production, the organization asked about including a hashtag as in please stand, and was informed that approval would not be provided in time, and was asked to approve the ad without the hashtag. The organization did not respond, and the program ultimately went into production to meet deadlines, McCarthy finished. So, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I believe if it had been the women's movement, Black Lives Matter, I think maybe it'd have been approved. You know, the NFL wants to talk that they stand by vets. I don't truly believe they do. They do when they have 1 week a year for Salute Your Troops. What the NFL needs to realize, and if any of y'all listening have any connection with anybody in the office, NFL office, they need to realize one thing. Their primary viewership would actually most likely be veterans and active duty. And in a second, I'm going to give Phil the mic and let him talk about his point of view on this story. But serving in Afghanistan, being over there during wintertime, during football season, my whole unit, everybody waited for AFN, Armed Forces Network, to play whatever game. We had people from all over. We had Patriots fans, Eagles fans, Bungles fans, Cowboys fans, every fan. But when AFN played any game, we all were attached to the TV. Well, our jobs too, but we were attached to the television. Basketball didn't do it. Baseball didn't do it. Hockey didn't do it. Football brought us home. We felt somewhat at home watching football and watching our team. Even when I was stationed at Fort Carson and I was still here, I wasn't able to be in Houston, but I bought DirecTV just so I can watch the Texans because it made me feel at home. The NFL needs to realize you have got to start doing a hell of a lot better for veterans. And by not running this simple ad, it's a one-page ad, I think it's bullshit.
I think the NFL screwed the pooch on this ad. I don't think. I think they've run other ads that could be construed as political. This is nothing more than the picture. There's nothing obscene or nasty about the picture. I mean, it's essentially it's a serviceman holding the flag. And all they're asking is that you respect and honor the flag by standing and putting your hand over your heart, or at least taking your hat off and holding it by the side, and giving proper respect to the flag. And yeah, when you're walking, you might be off duty and you're walking to the PX and you hear revelry. What do? You stop and you honor the flag. You stop and you turn the direction. You salute and pay homage to the flag. And you're not just paying homage to the flag, you're paying homage to everyone that's fought for that flag and either been wounded or, God forbid, gave up the ultimate price for the flag.
And what happens then? You are draped in that flag.
Exactly. And
that flag means everything to any military member.
Absolutely. And I think, I guess I'm going to go off on this one more time here. Colin Kaepernick has every right in the world to protest or bring attention to whatever cause that he wishes to bring attention to. But when you have a bunch of people that are just doing this because, and they are all, none of these guys were on the same page. That's really what the bottom line is. None of these guys were on the same page. Nobody, if you asked 5 different guys why they were kneeling, you'd have gotten 5 different answers. And I think you had a lot of players that were just doing it for the sake of doing it. And it's kind of sad I think it's sad to see something like that happen. And to me, it's just extremely disrespectful. And I don't think the NFL has a leg to stand on as far as saying, we want to get away from this. They're going to spin it however they can to make themselves look good. But the fact of the matter is, by allowing, by not coming down and making some form of rule or a mandate to have people either don't have the players out on the field before the national anthem, or if they're going to be out there, you need to stand for the anthem. But the NFL has basically opened themselves up to this by allowing all this nonsense to go on throughout the last couple of seasons. And, frankly, if I didn't enjoy the NFL so much, which is, I really hate to say this, and if I wasn't doing this podcast, I would probably be strongly considering boycotting the NFL myself. But when I was overseas, we always, like Jake said, always looked forward to watching the Armed Forces Network, and it didn't make a bloody difference as to what game was on. It was football.
Or what time.
Exactly.
Because remember, time frame, Afghanistan, I'm watching this at Monday morning at 3 o'clock in the morning.
3 o'clock in the morning, absolutely.
But I'm willing to do it because it makes you feel at home. That football was one of those sports that just made you feel like you were at home. It's like I'm sitting in the mess hall in Kabul on a big screen watching football, and I'm forgetting that I'm in a sand pit, that I'm in this
sand fleas
shithole.
And God knows.
Straight up, just shithole, to steal a line from President Trump. And watching football, people hitting each other, just made me forget where I was. And for that time, for those 3-4 hours, it was beautiful. I agree with AMVET's national commander, Marion Polk, when he called the move by the NFL as, quote unquote, corporate censorship. How are you going to deny veterans the right to free speech? Isn't that what this is? It's a simple page that says hashtag please stand. How are you going to censor that? Why are you going to censor that? You're not really going political. If people know it, then they can take it that way. But they're just saying, please stand. And I think it's well deserved. The way the NFL has dealt with the kneeling this year, allow that in there.
It's been horrendous. The way the NFL has handled this has been absolutely horrendous.
Yes. And on that solemn note, we are out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Definitely tune in next week Cause
wait a minute. We got to end this on a slightly upbeat note. We can't end on something so somber. I'm sorry. We gotta end this on something good.
All right.
Here's some breaking news. I just saw it on Pro Football Talk. You can take it for what it's worth. But apparently Giselle is asking Mr. Bunchen to retire. So maybe this is going to be the last we see of Tom. But hey, Giselle is saying, hey, it's about time, buddy.
All right, Mr. Brady. Or
Mr. Bunchen.
Mr. Bunchen, sorry.
She makes more than he does.
Yes. He
as
does.
Scary as that is.
So, with that said, next week, I hope you listen in. We will be having our Super Bowl special where we will be talking the matchup, going in detail on the Patriots and in detail on the Eagles. We will also be talking a little bit of free agency because that's about to blow up. So please check us out next week.
Going to be real interesting.
For Ferocious Phil, this is good old JR on behalf of RA Design House. That's RA Design HAUS and E-4 Media. This has been E-4 Sports through the eyes of veterans. Hoorah!